for 3.5 million years, roughly the span separating the first stone tools from the modern human hand. Nothing on this continent challenged it. The Candeleros Formation, the rock layer that preserves this ecosystem, tells a story written in sandstone and mudstone, river channels cutting through swampy, seasonal floodplains, flooding in the wet months, cracking dry in the others. This instability is the entire economic logic of the ecosystem. When resources are unpredictable, biology tends toward two extremes: get small and fast, or get large enough that a bad season doesn't kill you. On the Candeleros floodplain, the herbivores chose large. Titanosaurian sauropods, like Andysaurus, moved through these forests in numbers, some individuals approaching 40,000 kilograms, roughly 7 adult African elephants standing nose to tail. Smaller Rabacosaurid sauropods, like Limosaurus, grazed alongside them, massive by any modern standard, but modest next to their titanosaur neighbors. For a predator, this is both an opportunity and a liability. An opportunity because a single successful kill could feed an animal for weeks. A liability because carrying the bulk needed to bring down something that large is itself expensive. Every kilogram of muscle a predator carries has to be fed, has to be cooled, has to be moved. This is the trade every apex predator on this floodplain had to make. Buitreraptor, a small dromaeosaur roughly the size of a spaniel, solved the food problem by staying small and fast, chasing prey it could swallow whole. Giganotosaurus, a heavyset abelosaurid built around 7 to 8 meters long, solved it at a mid-size, bulky enough to hold its ground against nearly anything on this floodplain, except the one animal standing above it in the order. Giganotosaurus solved it by going the other direction entirely. Scale up until almost nothing on the floodplain is off the menu. A floodplain this unstable didn't reward the fastest animal. It rewarded the one that could afford to be wrong the fewest times. Here is a number worth sitting with. A human being standing beside Giganotosaurus would not look like a person standing beside a lion. They would look like a person standing beside a moving piece of architecture. A skull alone approaching the length of an adult human, lifted 8 or 9 feet into the air. So how do you actually kill a sauropod several times your own body mass without a T-Rex grade bite? The answer starts in the mouth. Giganotosaurus carried dozens of teeth, each blade-shaped rather than conical, thin, curved, serrated on both edges, built the way a knife is built rather than the way a vice is built. At their largest, these teeth reached roughly 20 centimeters, close to the length of a standard kitchen knife. A crushing bite needs raw force concentrated into a narrow point of contact. A slashing bite needs something else entirely: precision, momentum, and repetition. Giganotosaurus's jaw musculature and neck anatomy suggest an animal built to drive that blade-lined mouth into flesh, then pull back and away, opening a wound rather than closing a grip. Then repeating the strike again and again until blood loss did the work no single bite could. There's a genuine debate among paleontologists, worth naming directly. Exactly how Giganotosaurus's bite force compared to Tyrannosaurus's remains contested, in part because barely half the skull has ever been recovered. What the evidence does support is that the two animals weren't competing on the same axis at all. One evolved to crush, the other evolved to bleed its prey out. Picture it directly. A young Andysaurus separates from the herd. Giganotosaurus doesn't sprint, it doesn't need to. The first strike isn't a killing blow, it's a calculation. A 20-centimeter blade opening a wound, forcing the giant to spend energy it can't spare defending itself. The predator isn't overpowering the sauropod, it's waiting for biology to do the work. But blade teeth alone don't explain how this animal reached a killing size fast enough to matter. That answer is thermodynamic. Bone chemistry and growth studies across large theropods, building on isotopic work by Barrick and Showers in the late 1990s, suggest these animals were neither simply modern reptiles nor identical to mammals. They occupied their own physiological territory, capable of rapid growth and an elevated metabolism, reaching adult size in a fraction of the time a purely cold-blooded reptile of similar mass would need. Giganotosaurus wasn't a mammal with scales. It was a dinosaur solution.
Here's where the biology gets counterintuitive. You'd expect an ambush hunter with this metabolism to also be a sprinter. It wasn't. Skeletal analysis of the hind limbs suggests Giganotosaurus as an adult, somewhere between 6 and 8 metric tons, roughly 2 adult male African elephants, was likely incapable of sustained high-speed pursuit. Its own mass worked against it on open ground, so it didn't chase, it waited. The tree line, the dense understory at the edge of the floodplain. A predator too large to outrun its prey solved the speed problem by removing speed from the equation entirely, closing the distance before the chase ever needed to happen. Giganotosaurus wasn't built to outrun its world. It was built to make outrunning it pointless. For most of the 20th century, the default assumption about giant theropods, Tyrannosaurus included, was simple: solitary hunters, meeting only to mate or fight over territory. Giganotosaurus, for a long time, was assumed to follow the same rule. That assumption doesn't survive contact with its own family line. A few million years after Giganotosaurus ruled the Candeleros floodplain, a slightly larger relative appeared in the younger rock of the Huincul Formation nearby, Mapusaurus. And Mapusaurus is known from a remarkable bone bed, the remains of at least 7 individuals, ranging from juveniles to a fully grown adult, found together in the same rock layer. That's not proof of pack hunting on its own. Bone beds can form from drought die-offs, flood events, or opportunistic scavenging around a single carcass. But combined with growth series data showing animals of multiple ages present at once, it opened a possibility nobody had seriously entertained: that giant carcharodontosaurids, Giganotosaurus's entire lineage, may have tolerated, perhaps even coordinated with, others of their own kind. The blade-tooth blueprint didn't end with Giganotosaurus. It continued. Mapusaurus inherited the same slashing bite, the same fast growth physiology, scaled up again to face the even larger titanosaurs, Argentinosaurus among them, that had moved into the region by then. The terrifying possibility is that the largest predator on this floodplain at either point in its 3.5 million year reign may not have been one animal. It may have been several, moving through the same corridors, turning a solitary giant into something closer to a coordinated hunting system. Pull the frame back further, and Giganotosaurus stops looking like a regional curiosity and starts looking like evidence of something planetary. Its family, the carcharodontosaurids, didn't just dominate Cenomanian Argentina. Close relatives ruled North Africa, Carcharodontosaurus reaching over 12 meters and 6 metric tons, sharing its ecosystem with Spinosaurus. Others ruled early Cretaceous North America, Acrocanthosaurus, with its distinctive sail of elongated neural spines. Still others, like Concavenator in Europe, filled the same ecological role on a different landmass entirely. For nearly 40 million years, roughly 8 times longer than the entire span of Homo sapiens' existence, this single family of blade-toothed giants held the apex predator role on almost every continent still connected by land bridges. Giganotosaurus was not the exception. It was the local expression of a pattern that had colonized the planet. One species doesn't dominate a continent by accident. A family dominates 4 of them by design. And then, within a few million years of that reign, it was over. Not just for Giganotosaurus, but for the entire carcharodontosaurid line in South America. The timing lines up with one of the more dramatic environmental shifts of the mid-Cretaceous, the Cenomanian-Turanian boundary, roughly 94 million years ago, marked by a major disruption in ocean chemistry,
widespread marine oxygen depletion, shifting sea levels, a documented rise in global temperature. The consequences weren't confined to the oceans. Across South America, the fossil record shows a faunal handover taking place around this window. Carcharodontosaurid fade, and Abelisaurids, the family that eventually produced the horned Carnotaurus, rise to take the vacant apex role.
Run the numbers on why that handover favored the smaller animal. A predator in Giganotosaurus's weight class likely required, by conservative metabolic scaling estimates drawn from comparably sized theropods, tens of thousands of kilocalories a day just to maintain itself before accounting for growth or a failed hunt. That number is only sustainable when large-bodied prey is abundant and predictable. When floodplain instability increases, when sauropod populations contract or shift range or simply become harder to find, an animal that size has almost no flexibility. It cannot switch to smaller prey the way a smaller, leaner Abelisaurid could. There is no smaller meal that closes the gap. Giganotosaurus didn't lose a fight. It lost an equation. The very adaptation that made it unbeatable is the reason it couldn't survive the world changing under it. It had optimized itself completely for a world of giants. And when that world contracted, there was nothing smaller left for it to become. Imagine for a moment that the sauropod populations of South America hadn't contracted when they did, that the Candeleros-style floodplain economy had held for another 20 million years. Carcharodontosaurids, not Abelisaurids, might have remained South America's apex predator into the late Cretaceous. Carnotaurus, the horned, stub-armed predator that has become one of the most recognizable dinosaurs in popular imagination, might never have had the ecological opening it needed to rise. The entire silhouette people picture when they imagine a South American predatory dinosaur could look completely different today. And here is what that means for you. The image most people already carry of the ultimate predatory dinosaur, the one used to sell movie tickets, the one every child draws first, is Tyrannosaurus. Not because it was necessarily the largest or the most dangerous theropod that ever lived, but because it was the one still standing when the asteroid ended the conversation 66 million years ago. Giganotosaurus was, by most length and mass estimates, in the same class or larger. It simply lost its ecosystem 28 million years earlier than Tyrannosaurus lost its own. Being the biggest predator on Earth was never a permanent title. It was a lease, and the terms were set by an ecosystem that owed this animal nothing. The floodplain is quiet again, not because nothing is there, because eventually nothing was. Somewhere beneath layers of sandstone and mudstone that would take 99 million years to become a badland outside a small Argentine town, the last of an entire predatory dynasty settled into the rock, waiting, this time, not to ambush anything, but simply to be found. The animal that once stood at the top of an entire ecosystem was discovered by accident, not by a team searching for a monster, but by a tire disturbing the ground. In 1993, a tibia was kicked loose from a hillside by a dune buggy in the hands of a man with no formal training in paleontology at all. A discovery this large, resting on this much silence, needed only the smallest interruption to surface. The largest predator discovered by the smallest disturbance. The tree line doesn't move anymore. But something is still there, encoded in bone instead of shadow, still shaping how we understand what biggest, safest, and permanent actually mean. 99 million years after the ecosystem stopped pricing this animal in as a threat and started instead remembering it as one.